continuing the instructions of Krishna to Arjuna. We have so far discussed about Krishna explaining the analytical knowledge of what is soul and what is body. From different angles of vision, Krishna has explained this to Arjuna. Now Krishna will describe what is Buddhi Yoga. Buddhi Yoga means the knowledge of yoga by which one works without expecting to enjoy any results. This Buddhi Yoga means, in simple words, to work in Krishna consciousness or to work for the satisfaction of Krishna only. In this way, one can become free from all bondage of world. In this endeavor of Buddhi Yoga, there is no loss, and a little advancement on this path can protect one from the most dangerous type of fear. What is the greatest danger in the human form of life? It is degradation to lower species. One who works in Krishna consciousness is never degraded to a lower life form, and such a person is sure to get at least a human birth in the next life. Material activities and their results end with the body, but work done in Krishna consciousness carries the person again to Krishna consciousness, even after loss of the body. One is sure to have a chance in the next life of being born again as a human being, either in the family of great cultured Brahmana or in a rich aristocratic family. By getting such a birth, a Krishna conscious person can further elevate himself. When one is situated in Krishna consciousness, all activities are on the absolute plane, spiritual platform, for they are no longer subject to any dualities like good and bad. In ordinary life, we know somebody may do some good activities, punya, or others may do some sinful activities, bad activities, which are called papa. But in Krishna consciousness, there is no question of performing papa or punya. In Krishna consciousness, all activities are completely transcendental, spiritual. They are absolutely good for the performer. Now, the resolute purpose of a person in Krishna consciousness is based on knowledge, by which he knows perfectly that Krishna is the root of all manifested causes. As watering the root of a tree automatically nourishes all the different parts of the tree, the leaves, the branches, the twigs, etc. Similarly, when a person works in Krishna consciousness, he can render the highest service to everyone, himself, his family, his society, his country, for that matter, the entire humanity. That is because simply by satisfying Krishna, a Krishna conscious person can satisfy everybody. Why? Because Krishna is the root of the whole creation. There are men of small knowledge who are very much attached to the flowery words of the Vedas. These portions of the Vedas, they recommend various types of rituals for getting some enjoyment in the future. So such people, they hope that they will take birth in heavenly planets in their next life, where wine and women are available in plenty and material opulence is very, very common. Now, being desirous of sensual enjoyment and opulent life, they think that this is the whole purpose of Vedic wisdom. Now, Krishna warns that those who are attached to such sense enjoyment and material opulence, they cannot have the resolute determination for devotional service. Now, the Vedas mainly deal with the subject of the three gunas. And Krishna warns that one should become transcendental to these three gunas if at all one is interested in Krishna consciousness. Because by becoming transcendental to the three gunas, one can become free from all dualities and anxieties for gain and safety. Krishna gives an example to help us understand this better. He says, just like all purposes served by a small well can be served at once by a great reservoir of water, similarly, all the purposes of the Vedas can be served to one who knows Krishna. Why? Because Krishna is the Supreme Brahman. What does this mean? To understand the example, it is said that in a village, people generally have different wells for different purposes. Some particular well water is used for washing clothes, some other well is used for drinking the water, some other well water is used for doing some puja. But if one goes to the river, then that river water is good for all purposes. The river water is good for drinking, it's good for washing clothes, it's good for taking bath, it's good for doing abhishek of the deity for sacred purposes. Similarly, if one knows the Supreme Brahman, Krishna, then such a person need not execute the various different rituals mentioned in the Vedas, in different portions of the Vedas. Because all the purposes of these rituals are served to one who knows the real purpose of the Vedas, the ultimate goal of the Vedas. What is the ultimate goal of the Vedas? The ultimate goal of the Vedas is self-realization. What is self-realization? Self-realization means understanding Krishna and one's eternal relationship with Krishna. This is what is self-realization. So, revival of Krishna consciousness is the highest perfection of Vedic knowledge. Even though the Vedas are describing elaborately so many different rituals, so many different details about papa, punya, about spiritual understanding, still the real ultimate goal of the Vedas is somehow lost when people become involved in executing the various rituals mentioned in the Vedas. So Krishna clarifies the ultimate goal of the Vedas is realizing Krishna, the Supreme Brahman. Now, as regards the duties that are mentioned in the Vedas, the prescribed duties for every human being, Krishna tells Arjuna that he should not neglect doing his prescribed duty. At the same time, he should do his prescribed duty without being attached to the results. In this way, one who is working can actually free himself from all bondage to work. Now later on it will be explained how there is a connection between the prescribed duties mentioned in the Vedas and the ultimate goal of self-realization through freedom from material bondage. But here Krishna just explains, any person who acts in Krishna consciousness, he very easily frees himself from the cycle of birth and death. Therefore, everything should be done in Krishna consciousness. All activity should be done in Krishna consciousness, and in this way one can become free from material bondage. Now there are some people who are described by Krishna as miserly people. Misers are those who do not know how to utilize the assets of riches which they acquire either by good fortune or by hard work. They waste the assets that they have by not utilizing it properly. Similarly, Krishna says, like the misers, unfortunate persons do not use their human energy in devotional service to Krishna. Further, Krishna says, a person engaged in devotional service becomes free from even all good and bad actions in this life. By good actions is meant punya karma, and by bad actions is meant papa karma. Punya karma and papa karma, though common people differentiate between the two and try to avoid papa because that entails suffering, and try to do punya, but both of them lead to material bondage. That people do not understand. So Krishna explains that both pious and impious activities, punya and papa, lead to material bondage. So to get out of material bondage, one should simply engage in devotional service, and that way one is guaranteed to become free completely from all bondage. Now Krishna also describes that those who are great sages or devotees, they free themselves from the bondage of all actions simply by engaging completely in devotional service. In this way they become free from the cycle of birth and death and become eligible to enter into the Vaikuntha planets. Now, Krishna also clarifies when he says, Arjuna, you should perform your prescribed duties. He also clarifies that the various duties mentioned in the Vedas, which involve performing different rituals, different sacrifices, different kinds of charity, yajna, dana, tapa, these are meant for people who do not take to Krishna consciousness. Why? Because anybody engaged in devotional service or Krishna consciousness has already attained perfection, and therefore there is no need for such a person to perform any of the rituals or sacrifices or charities, etc. A Krishna conscious person easily becomes fixed in his consciousness and attains the perfect state of samadhi. The goal of all these prescribed duties is to attain samadhi, or the perfect state of consciousness, fixed consciousness. So a Krishna conscious person, simply by engaging in devotional service, he attains that state of samadhi without any separate endeavor. Then Arjuna, he asks Krishna about the symptoms of a person who is situated in fixed Krishna consciousness. Such a person is called Sthita Prajna. So Krishna describes the various characteristics of a Sthita Prajna in the remainder of the chapter, second chapter. First of all, he tells the first characteristic of a person who is fixed in Krishna consciousness is that such a person gives up all varieties of desires for sense enjoyment. Now, these desires for sense enjoyment generally arise from mental concoction. Now, if a person gives up this business of mental concoction and thereby becomes free from desires for sense enjoyment, then his mind becomes free to be absorbed in devotional service. And by engaging in devotional service fully with his mind and attention focused on serving Krishna for Krishna's satisfaction, then such a person will find satisfaction inside. He no longer has to strive for getting satisfaction from some external sense objects. Such a person is said to be fixed in Krishna consciousness. Now, Srila Prabhupada explains, artificially nobody can stop sense desires by suppressing such desires. But by engaging in devotional service, one naturally is able to become free from sense enjoyment. And engaging in devotional service will help one to realize that he is an eternal servant of Krishna. As an eternal servant of Krishna, he simply engages in devotional service to Krishna, and by doing so, he finds full satisfaction within himself, simply in engaging in devotional service. He doesn't have to do anything else separately to get satisfaction. Now further, Krishna describes another characteristic of a person who is fixed in Krishna consciousness. He says, one who is not disturbed in the mind even amidst the threefold miseries. Material existence means always there is this tapatraya, miseries due to one's own body and mind, miseries due to other persons giving trouble, disturbing somebody, or due to natural calamities. So three kinds of miseries are always there in material existence. At different times one experiences different kinds of miseries. But a person who is not disturbed in the mind even when such miseries are present, neither the Krishna conscious person is elated when there is some happiness, material happiness. And also a Krishna conscious person is free from attachment, fear and anger. Such a person is said to be fixed in Krishna consciousness. Now, how is it that a person fixed in Krishna consciousness is neither attachment nor detachment for anything material? That is because his life is dedicated to the service of Lord Krishna. And such service is everything for a devotee, for a person in Krishna consciousness. So he is not bothered about happiness and distress due to material conditions. Now, in the material world, one who is unaffected by whatever good or evil he may obtain, neither praising something good nor despising something evil, such a person is described as firmly fixed in Krishna consciousness. Now, Srila Prabhupada explains, as long as one is in the material world, there is always the possibility of experiencing something good or bad. You cannot totally avoid different good or bad situations, because this world, material world, is a world of duality. It is not that always there are only miseries, neither is it that there will be only some kind of happiness. Both happiness and distress both come and go according to Kala. So Krishna says that one should be unaffected by such dualities. A person fixed in Krishna consciousness is not affected by such dualities of good and evil in this world, because he is simply concerned with Krishna, who is all good, absolute. Krishna is absolute, whereas every situation in the material world is a relatively good or bad situation. There is no absolute good in this material world. Absolute good means independent of certain situations or circumstances or certain conditions. Unconditionally, how is it possible to have absolute goodness? That is only possible in Krishna consciousness. That is what is explained here. Then further, Krishna explains, one who is able to withdraw his senses from enjoyable sense objects, as the tortoise draws its limbs within the shell, is firmly fixed in perfect consciousness. Krishna is describing the various characteristics of a person fixed in Krishna consciousness. He gives this example of a tortoise. So it is explained that the test of a self-realized soul is that he is able to control his senses according to his plan. Sense control is a very, very, very difficult thing. This will be explained in more detail in the later chapter. But here, Krishna particularly mentions that the difficulty in controlling the senses. He highlights that. He says that most people are generally servants of the senses, and they are unable to control their senses when it is required to restrain the senses. They are unable to do so. They are always directed by the dictation of the senses. Whenever the senses demand, they yield to the demands. Why is this said? Because anybody interested in spiritual life For them, there are many injunctions in the Vedas. Some are do nots and some are do's. You should do this in spiritual practice or spiritual life. You should not do something else. So, whole list of do's and don'ts. Now, unless one is able to follow these do's and don'ts, one cannot actually restrict oneself from the demands of the senses. So, consequently, spiritual life is generally very difficult for people who try to follow such injunctions of the scriptures. Now, the example of the tortoise is given to help us understand how a Krishna conscious person doesn't have the difficulty which common people who try to follow the Vedic injunctions have. The example of the tortoise is that the tortoise can at any moment wind up his senses within his shell or exhibit them at any time for any particular purpose. Similarly, a Krishna conscious person is able to use his senses for some particular purpose in devotional service. Otherwise, he is able to withdraw his senses without being disturbed by any sense attractions. So that is the advantage for a person engaged in Krishna consciousness completely. That his senses will not disturb him. Sense objects cannot distract him from Krishna consciousness. Now, if somebody tries to simply restrain the senses from sense enjoyment, what happens? Krishna explains that do not try to artificially restrain the senses. It will not work. What is the reason? Krishna says this is because the taste for sense enjoyment remains in the mind even if one externally tries to stop the senses. But to actually conquer the senses, one should stop indulging the senses by experiencing the higher taste of Krishna consciousness. What does this mean? Prabhupada gives an example. Just like devotees who practice eating only Krishna prasadam. Now, by practicing eating only Krishna prasadam, devotees are very easily able to control their tongue by not indulging in eating something which is not prasadam. Why? Because by eating prasadam, they are able to develop a higher taste. What is this higher taste? This higher taste enables them to relish prasadam and thereby lose their taste for other eatables which are non-prasadam. Similarly, with all the senses, in Krishna consciousness, we engage our senses in devotional service. In fact, the very definition of bhakti is engaging the senses in service of the Supreme Lord, who is the master of the senses. Rishikena Rishikesha Sevanam Bhakti Ruchyate. So devotees are neither trying to stop the senses, nor they are trying to control the senses by engaging in a restricted way. No. Devotees simply engage their senses in devotional service, and thereby they develop a higher taste of Krishna consciousness and very easily lose taste for all other types of sense enjoyment. Now, Krishna also explains the danger of not controlling all the senses. He says the senses are so strong that they forcibly carry away the mind even of a man of discrimination who is endeavoring to control them. If somebody does not try to control the senses, one who is interested in spiritual life does not endeavor to control the senses, thinking that somehow they can do some so-called practice of meditation and at the same time indulge the senses in some enjoyment, material enjoyment. Such a person actually is mistaken that by doing so in course of time somehow he will be able to properly achieve self-realization. Krishna is warning that the indulgence in sense enjoyment, even in a restricted way, will carry away mind forcibly towards simply all the time indulging in sense enjoyment. Therefore, Krishna says one should restrain his senses, keeping them under full control always. It's not like sometimes I may indulge in sense enjoyment and sometimes I may restrict the senses and only do some spiritual practice. No, that's not going to work. So, one who fixes his consciousness upon Krishna, completely engaging always in devotional service, only such a person can control his senses, not the others. Now, there is an example given in the Bhagavatam. There was one great sage, Durvasa Muni, who was a very powerful yogi. And there was a devotee, one king, Ambarisha. Now, Durvasa Muni once became unnecessarily angry against Ambarish Maharaj, and he tried to express his anger against Ambarish Maharaj. But in doing so, he lost control over his senses and ultimately he was defeated by Ambarish Maharaj, who silently tolerated the sage's injustices and emerged victorious simply because of his being fixed in devotional service. So the conclusion is, the senses can be completely controlled only on the strength of devotional service and not by any other method. That is the conclusion of this elaborate description of sense control by Krishna. Now, Krishna also warns what happens for a person who contemplates on the objects of the senses. It begins by just contemplating on the objects of the senses. Gradually a person develops attachment, and from such attachment lust develops. From lust anger arises. From anger there is delusion. From delusion there is bewilderment of memory. From bewilderment of memory there is intelligence, loss of intelligence. And when intelligence is lost, one falls down into the material pool. So a sincere devotee of the Lord, he completely gives up all types of sense enjoyment because of his higher taste for spiritual enjoyment in the association of the Lord. So he doesn't risk even contemplating on the objects of the senses, let alone indulge in actual sense gratification. So this is the secret of success. So Krishna says, one who is not in Krishna consciousness, however powerful he may be in some yoga practice by which he tries to artificially suppress his senses, he is sure to ultimately fail, just like the example of Durvasa Muni. This is because even though he may try to restrain his senses, the slightest thought of sense pleasure will agitate his mind, and he will be forced to satisfy the dictation of his senses. So, the danger of not being Krishna conscious is clearly pointed out by Krishna in this portion of the second chapter. Finally, Krishna concludes by telling, if one is not Krishna conscious, he cannot have peace of mind. And without peace of mind, there is no possibility of happiness. Therefore, only by Krishna consciousness can one become completely peaceful. And in such a peaceful state of consciousness, Krishna says, one is able to actually become completely fixed up in Krishna consciousness. A Krishna conscious person is naturally completely peaceful. It's not that he is not having any desires. Desires may be there, but those desires don't agitate his mind. He does not strive to satisfy such desires which may arise within his mind. He does not become agitated. He does not strive to satisfy such desires. And if one is situated in such a Krishna conscious state, even at the time of death, in such a person, Krishna says, can enter into the kingdom of God without any doubt. So this is the ultimate perfection of Krishna consciousness. To be able to be fixed up in Krishna consciousness before death comes and remain in such a state at the time of death, one is sure to attain the spiritual kingdom of God. Never again to take birth in this material world. Never again will he suffer any material miseries. This is the ultimate liberation through Krishna consciousness. This will be further explained in great detail in the following chapters of the Bhagavad Gita. We'll stop here. Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.